The problem of synchronicity has puzzled me for a long time, ever since the middle 20s, when I was investigating the phenomena of the collective unconscious and kept on coming across connections which I simply could not explain as chance groupings or runs. What I found were coincidences which were connected so meaningfully that their chance concurrence would represent a degree of improbability that would have to be expressed by an astronomical figure. Carl Jung. Everyone in society is a living, breathing organism with the same hive mind. We have one mind, and the connections, the unexplained coincidences, mean that we are on the right path.
Great to be with you, and thank you for teeing us off today and getting us started. I'm really looking forward to the next few minutes that I'm going to have with Bob Bench. Bob is Assistant Vice President in charge of payment systems at the Boston Fed. Before going there, he was Chief Compliance Officer and Assistant General Counsel at Circle. He spent some time at the Office of the Controller of the Currency as an examiner earlier in his life. He's a graduate of Boston College and Northeastern Law School. And Bob and I share something in common, and that is that Bob's a current regulator. I'm a former regulator. When you're in that role, you really realize that the challenge that we have in all walks of life, but I think it's particularly acute, between focusing on the day-to-day and yet keeping your eye on the long-term vision of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to build is really a challenge. And Bob is, I think, standing up to that challenge, doing some really interesting work in the area of digital payments, digital currency, distributed ledger technology, building a really amazing team up there. And I think
the XRP ecosystem is maturing. Circle is listed. Robert, that's being interviewed, used to work at Circle. Now he works for the Federal Reserve of Boston. Chris Giancarlo has publicly stated that XRP is not a security. He is currently working on the digital dollar project, and right now he is going to interview somebody from the Federal Reserve of Boston.
People are going to be very interested to hear Bob tell us a little bit about what he's doing at the Boston Fed in this area. And so, Bob, really glad to have you today. Thank you. And tell us all about the work you're doing.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris, and thanks, Accenture, for hosting. First, as a regulator, I have to say that everything I am saying here today does not represent the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston or the Federal Reserve System, and are my opinions only. I think to get right to it, Chris, we have a great opportunity at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston and within the Federal Reserve System to bring a lot of light to a lot of work that's been happening for a long time.
The Federal Reserve Bank of Boston is in a consortia with R3, Synchron, and many known RippleNet partners. This consortia is for KYC and AML checks. When I go to Synchron's website and click on Global Cross-Border Payments, the artwork on the website shows a fee in XRP.
I know one of the earlier panelists discussed that the U.S. has not been out front and public about the work.
What he is saying is that the Federal Reserve Bank is further than what people realize.
Sure. When I came into the Federal Reserve from the technology community, I was frankly amazed at how much work had been done, particularly in the policy sides of identifying issues that in some ways were waiting for the right technologies to come along to better enable them to maybe fulfill and improve our system.
This is why we're invested in crypto. It's because it's going to improve the system.
And so what I came to do, and the team I'm building at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston is doing, is working with our partners across the Federal Reserve System to understand how to apply these emerging technologies to these issues that have been in the system for some time, well understood by our experts at the Federal Reserve System, but maybe the right technologies haven't been there to solve them. And so what we're doing is we're a product-based team. We are a startup-style team focusing on understanding these technologies, testing these technologies, and working with the best and brightest from the private sector and the university sector to understand how we can solve these collective problems.
Dormant capital is the problem. Banks have money locked into Nostro and Vostro accounts just so they can send cross-border payments. Banks and corporates are profit-motivated. XRP is the best solution for this problem and allows them to utilize the stagnant capital. When you understand that this is the solution and work backwards from there, you will see the results that we are getting. The news, the speeches, the partnerships, it all makes sense when you understand that $27 trillion is about to be freed.
Well, way above my pay grade, but the question is the level of intermediaries, and then also who may also be allowed in that stack, right? So, for example, the People's Bank of China brought in Alipay and WeChat into central bank reserves.
He just said that the central banks are the ones that allow the technology stacks to happen. So the central banks are the gatekeepers of who can enter the system. The People's Bank of China gave permission to American Express, the RippleNet partner. American Express was working with Linlin Pay. Linlin Pay is also a RippleNet partner. This was China's olive branch to the United States for the trade war. Beijing said this was a goodwill gesture. The level playing field is a blockchain-based system that includes XRP.
And that effectively created direct central bank money on Alipay and WeChat. Bank of England has allowed payment service providers to have direct accounts, which has enabled really interesting technological developments there.
The Bank of England is a paid customer of Ripple's.
We need to learn from our peers in the central bank community and understand all the technology options so that policymakers can have those conversations and understand what's the best model for us moving forward 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years. Because that's a really important conversation to have.
Yeah, Bob, you referenced those other initiatives that are taking place around the world. Some of them put emphasis on the retail element, some put emphasis on wholesale, some put emphasis on international. Those are at least three areas where there are both challenges and opportunities. As you think about those three areas, how would you assess the challenges and opportunities as we think about implementation of a U.S. dollar in a CBDC environment?
So I think, from a technology standpoint, the wholesale side is fairly clean in the sense that you're dealing with institutions. And by their nature, institutions generally are known entities. Institutions don't necessarily have the same type of privacy expectations. And so you're really thinking about security and throughput there. And that is a model that's fairly well understood. And so then you're looking at questions like interoperability, transaction speeds, and understanding what intermediaries currently exist in that wholesale settlement stack, the value they add to the system, the current regulatory model around those intermediaries, and what would it look like if there was any change to that system.
U.S. banks can now offer crypto custody solutions. Polysign will go live in 2020.
Multi-sig software solutions to hold their funds. They want to have a qualified custodian to protect and safeguard their assets. Central banks wishing to issue their own digital currency will have to give serious consideration to custody solutions. How are they going to maintain and safeguard those funds from attack? You need a sophisticated multi-sig ceremony, and when I say a ceremony, I really do mean it is a ceremony amongst many, many people with a very sophisticated key generation mechanism. It's not a trivial matter. And possibly maybe using something kind of escrow solution that Ripple, similar to the one Ripple announced in late 2017.
On the wholesale question. And to be sure, other parts of the Federal Reserve are asking that same question. The general purpose question with the privacy factor on top of it, we find it the most interesting and requires significant research on our part.
Yeah. Bob, since we launched the Digital Dollar Project, we've received so much incoming requests for opportunities to partner, firms that are doing really interesting technological work on the private sector side, seeing that they can partner. There are no lab environments in place right now by the Federal Reserve for.
The Digital Dollar Project gets requests for partnerships. Gina Carlo has recently announced that XRP is not a security. Ripple has the most partnerships and has made the most traction in this space. We have also caught the Digital Dollar Project members using Ripple's elevator speeches. I suspect the Digital Dollar Project has already partnered with Ripple.
Bringing in input, you yourself have brought that in from your private sector experience, but opportunities for ongoing public-private partnerships. What do you see as perhaps the possibility going forward for the private sector to bring their expertise and technological capability in support of a national effort to realize a CBDC?
Yeah, I think our partners in the other central banks have had a fantastic run over the last several years, working most particularly in the wholesale settlement question. Whether it's the Bank of Canada, the HKMA, Singapore, they've done fantastic work on inter-central bank interoperability. And they've worked well with some of the best enterprise blockchain groups and the best consulting firms.
So that's one thing. On our side, we've been working with JP Morgan and MAS on Project Ubin. This was announced last November. We're exploring a blockchain-based network for multi-currency payments and settlements, okay? And so we're trying to build an ecosystem around a new blockchain-based payments model, starting in Singapore, using a digital currency. And we'll announce more details when appropriate.
The wholesale settlement question, whether it's the Bank of Canada, Hong Kong, Singapore, inter-central bank interoperability. Inter-central bank interoperability.
Wholesale settlement question. Whether it's the Bank of Canada, the HKMA, Singapore, they've done fantastic work on inter-central bank interoperability. I think the Federal Reserve doesn't speak a lot about, but has been doing, as long as I've been in the private sector, has been having in-depth conversations with the leading private sector technologists and thinkers on these questions. So to be sure, we are talking to everybody, and we are learning. Our job is to learn from the best and the brightest from all sources that we can get, whether it's universities, private sector, or within the Federal Reserve System itself, which has its own deep cadre of experts in the payment space.
In July, Ripple announced results of their collaboration with two of the world's leading central banks, the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England. Both have studied Ripple's blockchain solution to improve cross-border payments.